Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Rangam's webinar today with the National Down Syndrome Society. I would like to welcome our audience on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Today's subject is employment for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The team speaking today is John Bryson, Rangam's Director of Learning and Development, and from NDSS team, Ryan Rotundo, Manager of Employment Program, Kayla McQueen, Manager of Grassroots Advocacy, and Charlotte Woodward, NDSS's Educational Program Associate. Thank you, each of you, for joining us today. With that, Ryan, I will toss it to you. Take it over.
Thank you so much, Nish. Thank you all for having us. Very excited to be here with Rangam, a tremendous partner to NDSS and the work that we get to do to support people with Down syndrome and other intellectual and developmental disabilities. So with that, I would ask that we go ahead and put our presentation up. I want to wish a special welcome to the folks that are joining us live on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Welcome. We hope that this will be of value to you all. We will have a moment for questions toward the end, but we also would encourage you all to put your questions in the chat or perhaps even take a note to the side that you can remember to ask us at the later date. And then also we ask that you would take a look at our contact information, because we will have that at the end, and we're happy to answer questions that may come up even after today. I'm one of those folks who a lot of times sit on some information and will have more questions as time goes by. So we welcome those as well. So we want to provide just a brief introduction to Down syndrome and to the National Down Syndrome Society. So when we do these presentations, we really want to make sure that we're not operating under the assumption that participants are very familiar with Down syndrome and what that might mean or what that is. So we want to be able to provide information about that specifically, as well as about our organization as a whole. So the mission of National Down Syndrome Society is to be the leading human rights organization for all individuals with Down syndrome. And we envision a world in which people with Down syndrome have the opportunity to enhance their quality of life, realize their life aspirations, and become valued members of welcoming communities. The National Down Syndrome Society was founded in 1979 and has been headquartered in New York City until just a few months ago when we moved our offices to Washington, D.C. As you might imagine, some of the great work that we get to do around advocacy and public policy, it's beneficial for us to be close to the Hill and some of our country's legislatures, and so we really are happy in our new spot there. So I want to provide just a little context. Intellectual and developmental disabilities, often referred to simply as IDD. Intellectual disability. Now, this is sort of a textbook or even in some cases that medical definition. This comes from the American Association on Intellectual Developmental Disabilities, or AAIDD. It's a condition characterized by significant limitations in both intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior that originates before the age of 22. When we talk about Down syndrome specifically, this is something that individuals are born with. There is not a quote unquote cure for Down syndrome. This is not, it's not something that's contagious. It's something that is really built in at the cellular level, which we'll talk a little bit about in slides to come. But want to provide just a little context again into what intellectual disability means, again, from a textbook definition. So from intellectual functioning standpoint, this is intelligence. We see that learning, reasoning, and problem solving can be affected. Oftentimes, intellectual functioning is measured by an IQ test. You may hear different perspectives on the IQ test or the intellectual quotient test. I have a background as a special education teacher of 10 years, and this is something that is used throughout the school system to really gauge an individual's abilities in terms of reading comprehension, math computation, and those types of areas. Typically, intellectual disability is characterized by an IQ score of around 70 or below. Again, these are textbook definitions, and we'll build on this as we go forward in future slides. Adaptive behavior is another area that's impacted and that is talked about from the intellectual developmental disability standpoint. Social skills can be a little bit maybe challenging. Interpersonal skills, social responsibility, self-esteem, gullibility, so a person's naivete or their ability to kind of go with maybe the recommendation of others, and social problem solving can also often be affected as well. In terms of practical skills, activities of daily living, such as personal care, occupational skills, in terms of being able to work and complete tasks. Healthcare can sometimes be an issue for people with IDD. Travel and transportation can sometimes be challenging. Being able to navigate a transportation route, say public transit, within a metropolitan area. Developing and following schedules or routines, understanding safety and certain ways of keeping oneself safe in different environments, use of money, use of telephone and other technologies. Conceptual skills can also be impacted. So language and literacy, money, time, number concepts, and even self-direction, or being able to advocate for oneself. Now, I read all of these things, again, because this is somewhat of a textbook definition. We know that all individuals, regardless of disability, have different strengths and areas of need. So one of the things that I would encourage our audience to think about today is this list as it pertains to the definitions of people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and then take that, juxtapose some of the stories and testimony and different things that you're going to hear from some of our speakers, but also in some of the content that I'll share later on in slides. I also want to kind of set this context, the framework around the lived experience of someone with Down syndrome or an intellectual or developmental disability, as well as the parents and family members of those individuals who oftentimes are met with these definitions or these preconceived notions around what the loved one with an intellectual or developmental disability is capable of. Oftentimes, these are the definitions, or these are the terms, or the stereotypes that are shared at birth or at different stages of development, whether in the school system or in accessing employment and other parts of life after graduation from school and in pursuit of other endeavors. So I think it's important for us to consider how we carve our own paradigms and our own stereotypes or our own notions around individuals with differing abilities and how much they are capable of doing these things in life. So, facts about Down syndrome. Individuals with Down syndrome have 3 copies of the 21st chromosome. Typically, developing individuals only have 2 copies. This is significant for a number of reasons. Obviously, this is the genetic characteristic that is unique to Down syndrome, but it's also special in that 321, that number. So, there's a 3rd copy again of the 21st chromosome. And within the Down syndrome community, those numbers 321 are pretty important and oftentimes celebrated. So 321 is the date March 21st, which is also known as World Down Syndrome Day. So it's a day that I myself, as the younger sibling to someone with Down syndrome, as well as an employee at NDSS, along with many others around the country and around the world, get to celebrate what an amazing impact this third 21st chromosome has had on our lives and celebrate the folks that we know that have Down syndrome. It's also something that you'll see pop up in other areas. We've just recently launched within National Down Syndrome Society a fitness program called 321 Go. And it is a fitness program that has been specifically designed for individuals with Down syndrome who may have a genetic predisposition for being obese. It helps them to get fit, get active, stay moving, and stay healthy and lead healthy lives. So again, you'll see that number pop up maybe in different areas of the community. So there's no definitive scientific research that indicates that Down syndrome is caused by environmental factors or the parent's activity before or during pregnancy. There is some correlation that would point to the age of the mother at birth or at conception. Other than that, there's really no connection to a particular ethnicity or socioeconomic status or even region around the world. So it's kind of a beautiful thing that we get to serve folks across the country and in some cases in other parts of the world. It really does not discriminate against one area or another. Down syndrome is named after the English physician John Langdon Down, who characterized Down syndrome. And a few of the common physical traits of Down syndrome may include low muscle tone, smaller stature, an upward slant to the eyes, and a single deep crease across the center of the palm called a single palmer's crease. Each person with Down syndrome is unique, and they may possess those characteristics or maybe not at all. Approximately 1 in 772 individuals are born with Down syndrome in the United States each year. And individuals with Down syndrome can be included in general education classrooms with their peers, in workspaces alongside their non-disabled peers. Many individuals with Down syndrome own their own businesses, as you can see at our website for the National Down Syndrome Society's employment program page. We have hundreds of stories of individuals with Down syndrome who have been successful in employment and again have been successful in self-employment or owning and operating their own businesses. We also have several individuals with Down syndrome on staff at NDSS who have pursued careers in the spotlight in Hollywood and have been a part of feature films and so many other things. And again, I want you to go back to the previous slide that we talked about some of those limitations and think about how individuals with Down syndrome are truly capable of achieving so much more than what some of those definitions may have originally led us to believe. And with that, I want to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Kayla McEwen. Kayla is the manager of grassroots advocacy. She is a speaker, a tremendous advocate, a graduate, which you'll hear more about, a gold medalist, and she was named the Self-Advocate of the Year in 2016 with National Down Syndrome Society. And I don't want to steal your thunder, Kayla, so I'll just pass it over.
You're not. You're good. And thank you for those warm and wonderful kind of words, Ryan. Thank you very much. And good morning. And I'd like to thank all of you for inviting me here today to speak to all of you. As you heard, my name is Kayla McEwen, and I am the manager of grassroots advocacy at the National Down Syndrome Society. I am also known as a FIRST registered lobbyist with Down syndrome. But this morning, I'd like to start off by sharing a little story about myself. and share the story of how I came to work for the National Down Syndrome Society and become a lobbyist. I am from Syracuse, home of the Orange. When I was 18 months old, my parents enrolled me in an early education program at Main Street School. I progressed through school and lost all my classmates, and I graduated at age 18. And as soon as inclusive education became possible, I was always in an inclusive setting, but won't deny there's some bumps and stumbling blocks along the way. But my parents always thought it was best for me to be included with my classmates and placed in settings that challenged me to reach for my highest potential. There were times when they pushed me, but always because they knew I could succeed. When I was 13 years old, I got involved with Special Olympics. I still play many sports each season. It was through Special Olympics that I gave my first speech. And wow, did I find out I really liked it. Excuse me, loved it. I learned that I had the ability to speak for others who could not speak for themselves. I continue to speak on behalf of Special Olympics as a Congress member and an ambassador for them. I actually traveled to Athens, Greece as a World Game athlete in 2011 and medaled in bronze and silver in bocce ball. And I've been invited to participate this past June in USA Games in Orlando, Florida, where I medaled in gold and bronze in competition. Pretty cool, right? I also attended Onondaga Community College, which is a community college right here in Syracuse, New York. And I took some non-credit courses. Then I started thinking to myself, I love school, but it doesn't make sense that I'm doing all this work without earning any credits. But I really like and enjoy the classes. So I began taking one course per semester for credit. And I can happily say, after 12 very long years, I finally received my associate's degree this past May. And I graduated with my peers, cum laude. And I am extremely excited. Can you tell? I think so. But throughout my time in school, working was also a top priority of mine, and still is. Before I started working with the National Down Syndrome Society, I did have a couple of jobs. I used to work at the Syracuse Post-Standard in the Human Resource Development. I would assist in the archive section, which was very interesting, as well as assisted with setting up events. I even have my own byline in the paper, so I don't have it on me to show. I also had a job at Paparazzi Salon and Day Spa, where I would help at the front desk greeting customers as they walked in, and sometimes I would assist in cleaning up. My favorite part was interacting with the customers. If you can't tell, and I think you can, then I'm very much a people person. So the front desk is where you can find me mostly. I also volunteered my time at the local YMCA. Again, interacting with the customers was my favorite part. But I worked at Paparazzi Salon and Day Spa for 14 years. My mentor, Rachel Bones, provided support when I was working at the salon. And I really did benefit from Rachel, providing me with clear instructions and a checklist when I need it. Not only was she my mentor, she is my best friend. Several years ago, I became involved with the National Down Syndrome Society as a volunteer while I was working at the hair salon. In 2016, I was named the Self-Advocate of the Year. Woohoo! In the meantime, back in Syracuse, I met John Cargo, who was running for the U.S. House of Representatives. He handed me his business card. Needless to say, I handed mine to him too. He called me and said if he was elected, he wanted me to come and work for him. Well, guess what? He won his election, and I became an intern in his Syracuse office. I would represent the representative at different events, which included a citizenship award on his behalf, which was very exciting. I also led on data entry and management. I became a valued member of his office staff alongside my non-disabled co-workers, which I still consider my friends today. While I was interning for the congressman, I was also working in a local restaurant here in Syracuse called Modern Malt, an eclectic breakfast diner. I was a hostess at my job, and my job consisted of seating patrons and running food to customers. So as you can see, I keep myself very, very busy. But in June of 2017, when I was working at the diner and interning with the representative asked me to go with him to a disability conference in Washington. I didn't realize that at the time it was with the National Down Syndrome Society. It was there at the end of the meeting. The NDSS offered me my job of manager of grassroots advocacy. And you know what they say about history? The rest is history. Then I started working for NDSS in October 2017, and I never looked back. So I've been with NDSS for 5 years to this day. In my role of manager of grassroots advocacy, I am responsible for educating others on matters on what people with Down syndrome, educating others on what people with Down syndrome are capable of. And lobbying to members of Congress to pass laws that positively impact the Down syndrome community. I have spoken to elementary schools, middle schools, colleges, and my personal favorite, the School of Nursing. I try to motivate them to do the best that they can do. My message to kids is to persevere. When I deliver speaking engagements such as this, I speak about education, employment, my accomplishments, my self-advocacy, and now legislation that affects all of us who have disabilities. I have a passion for speaking and motivating others to try their best and never give up. I tell people that Down syndrome is not, I repeat, not a sad diagnosis. I tell them that we are living proof of much more of what is expected of us and all the things that we are capable of doing. I tell them about my friends who own businesses that are thriving, like John Cronin or John's Crazy Socks, or Billy Pyron, who owns Big Snow Shack in Cinco, Texas, or Kerry Boudron, who's a third-degree black belt in karate. Watch out. I tell them about the girl who got a dream job at Target. I could go on and on, but if we did that, we'd be here all day. I don't think we want to do that, so I won't. But we are exceeding the expectations every day. Please don't limit us. Down syndrome doesn't stop us. It never stops us. There's some old antiquated laws and mindsets that hold us back. Personally, and always will, love being a self-advocate, sharing my voice. I love living on my own, having my driver's license, being in a committed relationship with my wonderful and loving boyfriend. I love working at NDSS. Always. And not just because my colleagues are right there either. And earning a paycheck. Equal pay for equal wages. We are more alike than different. Thank you again for having us speak with you today. And I look forward to questions you have later. Thank you.
Kayla, thank you so much for sharing your story. One of the things that Kayla, you say that just it goes back to some of those preconceived notions and paradigms that oftentimes accompany our perspectives or the way we view folks with disabilities. And it is, there's oftentimes I hear a stereotype, right? As the manager of employment programming for the National Down Syndrome Society, I hear this stereotype that people with disabilities, people with Down syndrome might not be reliable employees, or they might not be dedicated, or they might be, apathetic to the work. And one of the things that you say that stands out to me is you held your job at Paparazzi Day Spa for, what was it, 14 years? That to me says dedication. I don't honestly can say the longest role that I've held was as a special ed teacher, and that was for 10 years. So 14 is quite a while. So congratulations on that. And I love the idea too that you kind of give a nod to the individuals. You mentioned your colleague Rachel, who provided some support, some kind of reasonable but also not overwhelming assistance in creating checklists and helping you sort of stay on track at that job. A lot of times you are met with this pushback from employers that think that providing accommodations are oftentimes expensive, or that this might be some huge hurdle to employing individuals with disabilities. And sometimes it might be just as simple as introducing employees who might be typically developing employees to individuals with disabilities and saying, hey, teach them what you know, and maybe help provide a little bit of assistance or structure along the way. And I'm sure that Rachel learned quite a bit from her time working with you as well. So it's a two-way street.
Absolutely, yes.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kayla.
Absolutely. And now I would like to turn it over to my friend and my colleague, who is a short head on her shoulders, Charlotte Woodward.
Thank you, Kayla. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlotte Woodward. I am the Education Program Associate at the National Down Syndrome Society, and I am so honored and excited to speak to you today. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I am proud to say that I have Down syndrome, which is a condition that occurs when an individual has an extra copy of the 21st chromosome in their cells. Down syndrome is the most common chromosomal condition, and everyone who is born with Down syndrome is unique, just as every person on Earth is unique. However, as people in the disability community like to point out to others, people are all more alike than different. When I was born and my mom was told that I had Down syndrome, she did not know what that meant. She had never heard of Down syndrome, and to the best of her knowledge, she had never encountered anyone with Down syndrome before. In fact, other than rare glimpses of a group of students with various disabilities being led to a room at the end of a very long hallway in her high school, where they were sequestered away from everyone else, she did not have any other experiences with someone with a disability. In the past, people with disabilities were secluded and excluded from society. Today, there is much more inclusion, but still not nearly enough. Many people still have never met or interacted with a person with Down syndrome, so stereotypes persist. As the Education Program Associate at NDSS and as a disability activist and advocate, I consider it my mission to dispel those stereotypes and to invite others to include people with Down syndrome and other disabilities in their social lives as well as their workplaces. Within minutes of my birth, doctors told my parents that I would most likely never learn to read or write, and that when I was older, I would probably end up working in a sheltered workshop, where workers with disabilities are secluded from their typical peers and are often paid sub-minimum wage. My mom did not understand how the doctors could make such predictions about my future abilities and the path I would follow in life. Thankfully, she did not take the doctor's word to heart. My mom had been a preschool teacher before I was born, and my family has always highly valued education. My mom noticed from the very first moment I opened my eyes, I looked at the world with great curiosity, which led her to believe that I would be capable of great things. She became determined to do her very, very best to help me learn as much as I could, which has resulted in me becoming a lifelong learner. Not only did I learn to read and write at a very young age, I might add, but I went on to earn a standard high school degree and to graduate from Northern Virginia Community College, summa cum laude. I then transferred to George Mason University, from which I recently graduated, again, a summa cum laude. This May, I received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Sociology with a concentration in inequality and social change. My studies and my work perfectly complement each other. As a sociologist, I examine society's structural and systemic inequalities, and as an advocate, I use this knowledge to try to bring about positive change. I was also born with a congenital heart condition, which is fairly common with Down syndrome. I have had 4 open heart surgeries, 3 when I was a baby and 1 when I was 10. As I grew, my heart could not keep up with the rest of my body, and I had frequent episodes of vasovagal syncope or collapsing. My cardiologist determined that there was nothing more that could be done surgically to help me, and that I was in need of a life-saving heart transplant. I am so very grateful to have celebrated the 10th anniversary of my heart transplant on January 30th of this year. I am also so very honored to have a bill before both the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives that is named after me, the Charlotte Woodward Organ Transplant Discrimination Prevention Act. Too often, people with disabilities are denied life-saving organ transplants because of institutional bias and prejudice and discrimination in the medical field against people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and other disability conditions, and my bill aims to prevent this. I was born the year before the Americans with Disabilities Act became law. According to the ADA National Network, the ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. The purpose of the law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. This is something that I work to ensure for people with Down syndrome as an education program associate with the National Down Syndrome Society, and it is something that I encourage all of you to do as well. Having a disability is a natural part of life. People with disabilities are more alike than different. People with disabilities, including those with Down syndrome, have the right to be proud of who they are, to be treated with dignity and respect, and to be included. You can check out NDSS's employment program section on the National Down Syndrome Society's website at ndss.org. You can find resources which include information on ABLE accounts, employment and volunteer work, employment webinars such as this one, and a financial wellness guide. Other topics you can read about are partnering for career success, resume information, a Guide Me and Watch Me Succeed guidebook, employing individuals with Down syndrome, a set minimum wage guide, COVID-19, employment tips, etc. Inclusion in all aspects of society is so very important. When my mom was younger, people with disabilities were secluded rather than included, which is why she had never known anyone with Down syndrome until she had me, and it is why she never met any students with disabilities at her high school, because there hidden away from their non-disabled peers. I would like to emphasize that segregation and isolation do not equal inclusion. The world is a better place when everyone is able to participate and contribute to the best of their abilities. We can all learn from each other. I can learn from you and you can learn from me. We all have inherent value and worth. We all have unique gifts. We all also have our own strengths and challenges, as well as unique learning and working styles, which should be celebrated and explored. This is why people with Down syndrome deserve to be paid a living wage. According to the NDSS resource called Valued, Abled, and Ready to Work, employing individuals with Down syndrome, having people with Down syndrome as employees benefits their colleagues in terms of boosting workplace morale and fostering friendships. People with Down syndrome are loyal, hardworking, determined to succeed, etc., when they are included in the workplace. As a result, this creates a workplace environment where people with Down syndrome love to come to work, as it fulfills and stimulates them and gives them the opportunity to do things that they care about. My very first paid job was as a bagger at a local grocery store one summer during my high school years. While the job gave me the opportunity to gain experience, to demonstrate that I was responsible, to learn how to work hard and to interact with others, it was not especially stimulating or fulfilling. I was paid minimum wage, but I knew my worth and value was far greater than that. This wasn't something that I saw myself doing long term. I also got experience through volunteer work. I enjoyed volunteering at a local hospital and at a local library. By volunteering, I gained important skills which prepared me to go on to paid employment. In 2017, I was introduced to the National Down Syndrome Society, where I was actually the Grand Marshal at my local Down Syndrome Association of Northern Virginia Buddy Walk, which is a Down Syndrome awareness walk. I remember an NDSS campaign and pop-up restaurant called C21. It was diagnosed to show that people with Down syndrome have unique barriers to employment, and that no one should be defined by their disability, and that employees with disabilities deserve to earn at least the federal minimum wage. Unfortunately, some companies still pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. I attended the DC golf event hosted by NDSS, where I submitted my resume to Colleen Hatcher and our current president and CEO, Candy Pickard. I'll never forget that my now chief of staff and I sang the Lizzie McGuire song, "This Is What Dreams Are Made Of." In December of that year, I signed my official employment contract with NDSS. I met so many great people in the organization when I was invited to attend the holiday party. I am so proud to say that next month in December, I will be celebrating 5 years with this incredible organization that supports and demonstrates inclusion and belonging. I love my career at the National Down Syndrome Society. It is very stimulating and fulfilling experience. I am given the opportunity to show responsibility and to take initiative. My input and ideas are highly valued, and my contributions to the NDSS team are appreciated. In other words, my colleagues include me and respect me, and have professional high expectations for me. Having high expectations is very important. People with Down syndrome rise to high expectations, not low expectations. The point is that hiring people with disabilities is beneficial, not just for the employees with disabilities, but also for companies as well. Diversity enriches and strengthens society, and I encourage you to learn more about Down syndrome and to welcome those with Down syndrome and other intellectual and developmental disabilities into your lives and your workplaces. Thank you so much for letting me speak to you today. I will now pass it over to my colleague Ryan.
Charlotte, thank you so much, and I appreciate you sharing your personal story as well as your professional journey and how you got to the National Down Syndrome Society. One point that I always pull out of your story is that line where you're singing the song "This Is What Dreams Are Made Of." I think that's so it's so appropriate, right? You clearly, and one of the things you mentioned too, that your studies align with the work that you do. It's clear to me that from a young age, you were put on this journey to really affect positive change in the world around you. And I think that's also reflected in the fact that now you have a federal bill named after you, and the discrimination that you faced in organ transplant, and now wanting to make a change in that arena. So with that, I want to say thanks again to Kayla as well. I am humbled to be able to work with you all, to call you my colleagues, and I will mention too that the National Down Syndrome Society is an organization that really wants to walk the talk. We don't just give presentations and tell other organizations to be inclusive in their hiring practices and not do it ourselves. So we do like to share that we have about between 20 and 25% of our staff identify as having a disability. And I will say personally, even having, grown up in the disability service world, having an older sister with Down syndrome and being involved in Special Olympics and a lot of other organizations growing up, this is definitely something that has been a tremendous impact on my career as I've gotten to be more a part of the National Down Syndrome Society and the work that we get to do. So thank you both. And I look forward to many more years of working alongside each of you. So I want to take a quick pivot here to talk a little bit about tips for the workplace for those of you that are attending our webinar and joining in as perhaps maybe hiring managers, folks that have some decision-making opportunities within your organization, or even just an opportunity to maybe lead up and to lead by example and to have these conversations with supervisors around including individuals with disabilities in the workplace. One of the easiest, and I should say kind of lightest entry points is talking about language and being more inclusive in language and how we talk about and with individuals with disabilities. So one of the things that we did at the National Down Syndrome Society when I first came on board was we actually revised our preferred language guide. Now, within the Down syndrome community, there's language that is pretty unique to this community. And I'll just kind of give you the overview here. Referring to individuals with Down syndrome, we use people first language. And that is to say that we identify individuals first as humans, as people, as contributing members to society, and not by their disability first. So you might say a child with Down syndrome versus saying a Down syndrome child or Down's child. That would be the more appropriate term, is a child with Down syndrome or a person with Down syndrome. I want to remind folks again that Down syndrome is a condition. It is not a disease. It is not something that can be cured or caught, but it is something that people are born with. People with Down syndrome do not suffer from having Down syndrome. They are not afflicted by this. This is not, again, a negative thing. We oftentimes hear this language and it has a very negative connotation, similar to the idea that an individual might be wheelchair bound. Again, that is a very negative connotation. Maybe a person uses a wheelchair, but they are not bound or restricted by that wheelchair and how they use it. But again, within the Down syndrome community, we refer sometimes to this as an intellectual disability or a cognitive disability, never mental retardation or retardation in any form. That is an antiquated term that we no longer use. And NDSS strongly opposes that terminology. I will also say that just on a technical note, whenever you're spelling Down syndrome out, it is Down, D-O-W-N with a capital D, and syndrome with a lowercase s. There is no apostrophe. There is no possessive noun here. So there's no apostrophe s whenever we're spelling this word. So how does this look in other organizations? So around culture, again, this idea of language, some organizations might use people first language. Some organizations might adopt what is called identity first language. And sometimes people first language is most appropriate. Sometimes identity first language is most appropriate. I'll give you an example. So again, within the Down syndrome community, it is most widely used that we have people first language. I gave you some examples there. Within the autism community, you might hear individuals using identity first language. That is to say, rather than saying I have a son with autism, I might say I have an autistic son. Also within the deaf community, rather than saying the person I know is deaf, they might say that is a deaf person with a capital D. Again, these are just going to be pieces that help build culture within organizations. And it starts with a conversation, helping individuals understand that there is that sense of belonging, and there is that company culture, that organizational culture, that we can have these conversations to really flesh out how we refer to disability and how we want people to feel included just with the language that we're using. Also, to help build culture in organizations, we encourage business leaders, HR professionals, other employees to model positivity and authenticity and respect. Whenever a person is inauthentic, it shows, right? I mentioned I have an older sister with Down syndrome, and I will say that oftentimes growing up, the individuals I spent my time with, the folks that I allowed into my friend circle, were people who included my sister. It was very clear to me when people were just kind of talking the talk or providing that lip service and really not buying into the idea that she was a person as well that could contribute to our friend group, that could contribute to society. So those things are very, very obvious in a lot of ways. And so it's important to maintain that positivity and, of course, authenticity and respect for one another. Also, being able to connect on an individual level. It's amazing to me what I've learned from Charlotte and Kayla. As I've mentioned before, I feel like I learn something new with them every time we meet or we're on a call together. I know that I can definitely count on Kayla to and Charlotte both to get after me if I'm late for a call, or if I'm missing a couple of minutes of our meeting. I will get a phone call from both of them. They are very on time and punctual. And so
Ryan.
those are some pieces that I definitely appreciate on an individual level. I know that I can count on them for that. Also, to establish clear expectations and priorities, and perhaps to reestablish as necessary. Kayla did mention again in her presentation that it helped her to have a checklist. That might be something that can be very helpful, and to be able to really clarify what's expected of individuals with disabilities, but also individuals who are considered non-disabled or typically developing within the workplace. Set those expectations so that everyone knows exactly what they're responsible for and what their roles could be. Accessibility is another key piece. I mentioned before, accommodations oftentimes are viewed as this maybe cumbersome or even expensive component. It has been shown that about 56% of reasonable accommodations in the workplace cost nothing, and that of that remaining 44%, the majority cost $500 or less. So really providing this access from a physical standpoint, as well as accessibility and being able to read and interpret and navigate those functional pieces of the employment space are really not as challenging or as big of a lift as organizations might originally anticipate. Effective communication can be key here as well. Understanding that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities might have a less typical communication method. It could be that communication is mostly done verbally, as with majority of your other employees, or even non-verbally, looking for those nonverbal cues, helping individuals understand that there is a place for that type of communication to exist, as well as the use of assistive technologies that might help augment some of the communication needs that an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability might have. Some other strategies that might be helpful in the workplace: chunking tasks. So doing 3 steps at one time versus creating a whole list of 10 or 50 steps that might exist in the workday. Maybe chunking those down into bite-sized pieces can be very helpful, as well as creating those bulleted or checklists. And visual guides can be particularly beneficial as well. Sometimes these are referred to as social stories that provide images in a step-by-step, almost a storyboard fashion, for individuals to understand exactly what the tasks might be. And then again, we mentioned the National Down Syndrome Society's employment program page. There are some downloadable and printable resources available there. One in particular that Charlotte mentioned, the Show Me, Guide Me, Watch Me resource. That is a tremendous guide for employers that are seeking to engage with individuals with Down syndrome and make their workplaces more accessible. So a couple things I want to point out too is this question. Think of to yourselves, what are the characteristics of exceptional employees? What makes a tremendous employee? Just think about that for a moment. We would maybe write down a list of different characteristics, such as being on time, bringing your best effort, being coachable, right? Having somebody that can adapt, but that can also take lessons and constructive criticism, having a positive attitude, bringing that to work, being prepared, having all the resources or having the tools that you need and the skills that you need, and then treating others with respect, creating that positive workplace culture. We could keep going and kind of fill in the blank here for some of the other characteristics that you might think of that that are indicative of exceptional employees. Nowhere on this list does it say that they have to not have a disability, right? That is not a characteristic of an exceptional employee. And as you've heard from some of these testimonies, and I'm sure we could get folks in our office to testify as well to what exceptional employees Charlotte and Kayla both are. And so again, just think about this list, and this is not indicative of a person with a disability. Disability employment landscape. So here's kind of what we're looking at in the United States at the moment. The unemployment rate for persons with disabilities is approximately 10%, which is nearly double that of a person with, persons without a disability. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment population ratio for persons with a disability ages 16 to 64, so that employment range is 31.4%. According to a study that was done specifically on workplace culture that is impacted by individuals with Down syndrome, people with disabilities earn on average of 63% of what their peers without disabilities earn. And then less than 20% of working age adults with a disability were employed. And this comes from 2021. So industry trends, a couple pieces that are important to think about in terms of hiring individuals with disabilities, or areas where individuals with disabilities might be successful in. Again, this is not just a one size fits all, but these are just some of the trends that we see from industry to industry. Persons with disabilities are more likely to work in service occupations than those with no disability, 18.2 to 15.9%. Workers with disabilities are more likely than those with no disability to work in production, transportation, and material moving occupations, and we're more likely to work in sales in office occupations over those without a disability. So again, this is not a one size fits all, but these are just some of the trends that we're seeing in the country. So the business case, why does this make sense? We talk a lot about how this is the right thing to do, how hiring individuals with disabilities creates more inclusive workplaces, can just be a kind of a feel-good story. For lack of a better term, we do share some of our success stories on our website. But why does this make sense from a logic standpoint for businesses? Organizations that prioritize disability inclusion experience 28% higher revenue, 30% higher profit margins, and in some cases, double net income. Again, this was the study I was referring to earlier, comes from a study done on workplace culture impacted by individuals with Down syndrome specifically. 78% of the survey respondents said that people with Down syndrome have a positive impact on workplace culture. This also has been shown to improve organizational health, and employers who embrace disability saw a 90% increase in employee retention. And these come from several different studies, but we can certainly share links to these. One in particular, the Accenture study. We'll make sure that you all have access to that. Would encourage you to do some research and digging on your own as well. So the business case, again, inclusive marketing. When you look at the outward facing part of your organization, right, it's all about perception. It's all about how do you as an organization want to be viewed, not just by the disability community, but by society at large. Persons with disabilities make up the third largest market segment in the country. That's a pretty large group. People with disabilities in the United States have an annual discretionary spending power of $220 billion, which doesn't even consider their family, friends, and other supporters. So when you talk about marketing and trying to engage with an audience of consumers, this is a tremendous opportunity for businesses as well. One thing that I do want to mention as we come to a close here, and we'll make sure we have time for questions, is that, again, Rangam and the National Down Syndrome Society partner on a tremendous organization called the CEO Commission for Disability Employment. So about 5 years ago, the National Down Syndrome Society, along with two other founding members, Voya Financial and the Society for Human Resource Management, came together and formed a collaborative called the CEO Commission for Disability Employment around empowering other organizations with top-down thought leadership as well as technical support to create these more inclusive workforces. So this is something that is just really near and dear to my heart. I know that Nish and I have had many conversations around the work of the commission. We are, of course, mission aligned. And there are several opportunities for other organizations to plug in here. You can see the website available on the scrolling marquee. Would encourage any organizations, individuals to check out our site and to see how you can maybe be involved in leading the way to an inclusive workforce. With that, we will stop and answer questions, as well as share our contact information for those of you who would like more information on what we do at the National Down Syndrome Society.
Brian, Charlotte, Kayla, thank you so much for taking time today to share your stories, your insights, your experiences, really advance the recognition of how capable people with intellectual disabilities are, and really dispel a lot of myths that people may have held coming into this call. So thank you. That your what you shared is incredibly powerful and impactful. I will say in my career, I've worked with thousands of people with intellectual disabilities, and I can attest that I've never, and this isn't me being overly optimistic or really just talking from the heart here. This is very factual and observable. I've never worked with a harder working group of people who have demonstrated greater work ethic, the level of attendance, retention in their jobs. Yeah, of course, there have been many cases where they may have taken longer to learn a task, but with the right support, given the right amount of time, good luck finding someone who outperforms in the long term. So really huge assets to a workforce. And I guess my first thought is that the biggest barrier is often what others think you're capable of. Charlotte, you talked about expectations, right? That you rise to the level of expectations that are set for you. So if people expect nothing from you or expect something very low, then you probably lose opportunities. There probably are a lot of barriers. And I find that one of the best ways to change those expectations is exposing people to more individuals with intellectual disabilities. And a great way to do that is through media like TV and movies, because not everyone has access to a person. So I was just curious if any three of you, if there's a particular movie or TV show you would recommend to people on the call. A really easy ask that might have a great character with Down syndrome. Thoughts?
I've got one, and I see Charlotte has her hand up as well. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention our colleague, David DeSanctis, who is an actor as well as an employee at NDSS. This is just a pitch here, so I know he's our colleague. He's been in 2 Hallmark feature films around the, I suppose they're holiday oriented, but really just, kind of like love stories, I guess, maybe rom-coms. I don't watch Hallmark.
But all of the above, Ryan.
Okay,
No,
all of the above.
Okay.
So I would have to mention David because he's a close friend of ours. I would also take a look at the Peanut Butter Falcon, which is a movie that features a man with Down syndrome, as well as kind of a lead, Shia LaBeouf. The movie has been acclaimed as one of the greatest, I guess, disability advocacy films. It is a nod to the writings of Mark Twain and the Huckleberry Finn story, just kind of this adventure story. But I think set in modern times, it really gives a unique perspective on empowering individuals with disabilities, but also allowing space for an individual to really shine and not try to squelch their true potential. So those would be some films that I would recommend. And
then I would also recommend Glee with Ron Pardo. I did meet her at a gala, one of our galas, so I would also recommend Glee.
And as for me,
a TV show.
Sorry about that, Kayla. I would recommend the most powerful movie of all, and you can find it on Netflix. It is called, or I should say, the most powerful documentary, and you can find it on Netflix, and it is called Clip Camp. It documents the disability civil rights movement from its inception in the 1960s and 70s. and how they fought for the passage of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And another TV show, sorry to cut you off, John, is also Born This Way, which features all individuals with Down syndrome, the life what they go through every day. There's another insight to another TV show that I think is definitely worth watching.
Yeah, I hope everyone listening wrote those down. Peanut Butter Falcon, Glee, Crip Camp, Born This Way, and what's David's last name?
DeSantis.
DeSantis.
Yeah, I'll grab this belly for you.
Yeah, because that to me is a really powerful way to give yourself some exposure in your own journey of addressing your unconscious bias and changing your own beliefs and attitudes. But the last question, we have a couple minutes here. The last question, what's one thing attendees could do to advance inclusion and make their workplaces more inclusive for people with intellectual disabilities? One simple thing, one thing they could do that might be a step in the right direction. Yeah, there might be a lot of other things, but what's the one thing they could do today?
If you don't mind, I will go first. I would say the most powerful thing they can do is to write and call the legislators on the U.S. Congress and in their state congresses to pass the transformation into competitive integrated employment.
This is what I always like to say. Don't squash our dreams. Because we have dreams, and if somebody squashes it, well, what do we have? And then I would tell parents, don't limit us. Because there's no way we want to be limited. We have so much to show, and we want to show it.
And I'll just wrap up and say,
Ryan.
Thank you both. John, I think just take the step. I think a lot of times we hesitate. I mentioned kind of my personal experience, friends who maybe were hesitant, didn't want to hurt my sister's feelings, thought that she was somehow breakable. I see this a lot too. That's sort of a microcosm of what we see in the employment space, where employers are sort of hesitant to even engage, or people in society are hesitant to engage with individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities, individuals with Down syndrome, out of fear that they might mess up. Take the first step, ask a question if you need to, but it's much better than being reserved and not giving the opportunity for yourself, number one, to learn, but also to create more opportunities for individuals to be engaged.
And if you're not sure how to take that step, organizations like Rangam and NDSS are here to help you figure out how to take this step. So we would love for you to connect with us, and we'll guide you through that process. So thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Charlotte. Nish, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share with our audience.
Thank you, Ryan, Kayla, Charlotte, for your time and this wonderful work you do at NDSS. Looking forward to 2023 and partnering and making and bringing that change in the society and especially at the workplace. So thank you for the partnership. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you all. Have a great
one.
Thank
you so much. I look forward to collaborating with you next.
Us too. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
You too.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.